Fred, 11:30 a.m., June 21st. Entering the episode of Twin Peaks. 8 episodes into the podcast rebrand, episode 66 of the main feed. I've never seen so many dream sequences in my life. As Homer Simpson would say, brilliant! I have absolutely no idea what's going on. 78 degrees and a slightly overcast day. Weatherman said rain. If you could get paid that kind of money for being wrong 60% of the time, it'd beat working. Dinner was $14.82 from the Dunkin' Donuts. That's on Layton in Milwaukee. 3 iced coffees and these cream cheese-filled bagels. Damn good food. Fred, if you ever get up to Layton again, those bagels are worth another stop. Looks like we'll be meeting up with David Lynch. Shouldn't be too hard to remember that. He's been directing movies since the 60s. I guess we're going to dive into this extremely wild series and try our best to make sense of his madness. When we finish there, we'll be checking in on Taco Bell again on our Patreon. I'm sure if he were here, Lynch would be able to recommend a favorite menu item that's reasonably priced. And that's what I need. A good menu item, reasonably priced. Oh, and Fred, I almost forgot. I got to find out what these dream sequences mean. They're really something.
It's time for Show Me the Franchise
with Thomas and Frederick. With Thomas and Frederick.
It's time for Show Me the Franchise
With Thomas and Frederick. With Thomas and Frederick.
Welcome to Show Me the Franchise, the podcast that talks about franchises of all shapes, sizes, backgrounds, genres, and types. I am one of your hosts, Tom Stadler. Here with me, as usual, is Fred Dakin, the director of Madness and All That We Dream.
It is good to be here, Tom.
Fred, it's happening again.
Yeah, we're in the red room.
Honestly, we are in the Black Lodge. Without giving away too much to our users, we'll just say this maybe isn't our first attempt at Twin Peaks. So it really is happening again.
Once per peak.
Yeah, one try per peak. But we have a lot to discuss today, Fred, with Twin Peaks. It is quite the wild series. If anyone is not familiar with Twin Peaks, it was a show on ABC back in the early 1990s, directed and written by David Lynch and Mark Frost. I don't even know how you would describe this series to anyone other than they're investigating the murder of a high school prom queen.
Yes, that, and then you say, and it's all a dream, maybe, or it's people's dreams.
Or it's the dream of America.
Ooh. Or you just say it's got dream logic.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of the series can be explained away with, yes, dream logic is what we're after. But yeah, it's definitely a series that I think I like to, you hear the phrase, something walks so that everything else could run. I do think in the case of this one, it is a series that ran so a lot of other things could walk and try to emulate it.
Definitely. I mean, it we're going to talk about it. It had its success. It kind of also had its, doldrums. Mm-hmm. But I do see a lot of modern TV through the, especially after watching Twin Peaks, I can see the connections.
Yeah. I mean, there are so many threads and so many things, and it goes a little bit even beyond TV. I mean, we see a little bit in movies, some of David Lynch himself. And I know we're trying to get ahead of the curve here because we had... Blank Check podcast is going to be doing a whole series on David Lynch, including like deep dives into these Twin Peaks episodes, which I'm kind of excited for.
I'm very excited for, and I feel we just didn't want to be spoiled with any of their takes or hot takes and thoughts. We kind of wanted to come in with our own, which sounds good, but also I still don't really know how to make up my mind about it all in Twin Peaks. I enjoyed Twin Peaks. I will say I watched it recently. That's what got us, when I heard Blank Check was doing it, I watched it and I was like, I find this show interesting and enjoyable. We should try to talk about it before we're just kind of regurgitating what other people said.
Yeah, exactly. Which I think it is hard not to do some of that with Twin Peaks, including our own previous thoughts that we've discussed on outside of the episode here. But I think you come into a place where you almost have to read up about the show to understand some of the things that are going on, like what's happening, or like even just like some theories to give you some ideas of where you want to go with it. But I guess I'm curious though, so where did you first encounter Twin Peaks even before you tried watching it?
I would say it was just back in college when everything started ending up on Netflix streaming, like when that boom happened. I feel like Twin Peaks was on Netflix for a very, very long time.
Oh, yeah, it was.
And I had given it a couple attempts, and this was, before. I always considered myself like a film person, but I really wasn't that well versed. I'm not very well versed now, but I'm more well versed than I was in college.
Give yourself some credit. You know your movies. I've been to trivia with you, and you pulled out some pretty big movie facts at you, and I was like, what?
Well, I appreciate that, but
Of course, bud.
I think because, and we'll talk about, Twin Peaks has such a interesting tone. I wasn't sure whether to take it seriously or not. I couldn't really connect with it. I fell off of it, and then it became this thing where I want to watch it, but this means I'm gonna have to rewatch the 4 or 5 episodes I have already watched.
Yeah.
And I think I did that, like, I had a few false starts, and so it was kind of a rocky thing. But once it got announced very recently that Blank Check was gonna do it, I feel Lynch is very prolific on like film Twitter and people talking about just film and cinema. And so I was like, I really should check all this out. And so I watched it all, and I have thoughts.
Oh, I am very curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, what about you? When did you come across the Peaks?
I feel like I always it was always in the periphery. I knew there was a thing called Twin Peaks, and then I would see references in like pop culture. Mostly The Simpsons would do a lot of riffs on them, and I kind of never was able to connect the dots then until I finally saw Twin Peaks pop up on Netflix, probably around mid to early 2010s.
Yes.
And at that point, I was like, well, fine, here it is. I've heard so much about this thing. I mean, I took some film classes in college, read and, saw a little bit about David Lynch. Previous to that, I had watched Eraserhead, and then I was sort of like, I'm not in a hurry to go and find anything else
Right.
by him. I'm pretty happy I watched that once, and that might be enough for me for a while in terms of just watching Eraserhead. But then, yeah, I watched Twin Peaks, and I was like, oh, I get it now. This is weird. It's like Tim Burton, but you realize, oh, Tim Burton was influenced by David Lynch, like not
For sure.
versa. Yeah. So it was cool. And I think I just sort of fell down the rabbit hole. I might have also had a similar start and stop. I know at least at one point in season 2, I kind of gave up a little bit. And then finally when I think season 3 came back around, I was like, okay, I'll go finish this. And so I powered through the end of season 2, which we'll talk about. It's the middle of season 2 is a tough hang.
It's a slog.
Yeah. But I was very, very riveted by season 3. I watched it week to week, and it was quite the experience. So I'm excited to dive into that. But I think Lynch, Twin Peaks, it's all kind of an acquired taste. Would you say?
Oh, for sure. And it was funny. I was just thinking about my introduction to Lynch as a person.
Yeah. What was it?
It was a super well-loved show that everyone loves to talk about. Louis.
Oh, man.
I just remembered this guy on Louis, and it was treated like a scene where it was like, you're supposed to know who this is. This is like a cameo. Or an extended cameo.
Yeah.
And when I looked at it, I was like, oh, this is a filmmaker. What is he? He seems like, I thought he was like a producer in real life, just playing the role of like a producer.
Oh, my God.
And it was just a weird experience. Like, that was my introduction. And then later I heard about like Racerhead. I had seen The Elephant Man, but didn't know it was him.
Oh, wow.
And then I watched Dune, or at least the first half of it when the new Dune came out. Mm-hmm. Which I thought the Dune kind of slapped. The old Dune of what I saw, I kind of enjoyed it.
Have you revisited it since?
I need to now that Dune Part 2 has come out, because now I was worried because the Lynch version covers like what's in the Villeneuve parts 1 and 2 all in one movie. It's like
Right.
truncated. So I remember watching, just kind of turning it off, like, okay, I don't want this spoiled,
Yeah.
for the version that's current.
I think that's actually why I ended up holding off on it, because I was ready to fire up Dune by David Lynch, and then I was like, oh wait, no, part 2 of Villeneuve's newer series. I was like, okay, wait, that's gonna cover it, and I was like, that first part was so good, I didn't want it spoiled, so like, I want to see that,
Right.
then you get to enjoy it, because I think also what the benefit is going to be now of revisiting Lynch's version is you're going to have like all that extra screen time that they had to tell the story in part 1 and part 2. So now you can follow whoever all the characters are, and maybe there's going to be a new appreciation, even though I think Lynch was kind of like a part of his soul died. I think he said when his Dune kind of failed.
Well, I will say it's also got a pretty fun cast. I mean, the Josh Brolin part is Patrick Stewart, and Fade Rotha, is that his name? The Austin Butler character is Sting.
Which is amazing.
So yeah, I think it's time we check it out.
But I think we can't ignore, though, too, that the lead in that movie is also the lead in Twin Peaks,
Look at that.
Kyle MacLachlan, who, I mean, this is, in my opinion, and I'm probably in the opinion of many other people too, this is MacLachlan's like quintessential role. Like,
For sure, it's his Mad Men.
right, when he has, and hopefully not for a while, but his like in memoriam segment, I feel like people are gonna certainly show scenes from like Fire Walk with Me, or just even like episodes of Twin Peaks at like the Emmys. And I mean, because he's had a good film career, but never great. It's like what, the Flintstones.
Yeah, he's the bad guy in Flintstones, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's in stuff, but he's definitely a smaller supporting role usually.
Yeah, I think he's a better TV guy. Sex in the City. Well, and also Lynch's other films like Blue Velvet. That'll be one for sure.
Right.
Which I don't want to keep thinking about as in memoriam. I want him. We'll get into it. I want more.
I think I always remembered him from How I Met Your Mother too.
Oh, who is he in that?
Robin's older boyfriend. Like she's dating like an older guy, and the whole joke is like the top half of his face looks scary, while the bottom half is like that Kyle MacLachlan grin.
Yeah.
So he has like these piercing eyes, and they're literally like moving like a piece of paper over his front and half face,
God.
which is a pretty funny bit.
It is good. It is really good. I can't remember anything about How You Met Your Mother anymore. But I think getting back to Twin Peaks and talking about, Kyle MacLachlan, I mean, he is one of an extensive, great cast in this. And maybe we should jump into a little history to kind of understand how all these people came in to be involved with the project. Because we mentioned already that like David Lynch and Mark Frost were the ones who created Twin Peaks.
Yep, and Mark Frost is like more of a TV guy, Hill Street Blues, right? Stuff
Yes.
like that.
Correct. And so he and David Lynch first worked together, though, on a screenplay for a film about the life of Marilyn Monroe. The name of the movie was called Venus Descending. It was based on a best-selling book called Goddess. I don't think this is the book that ended up influencing the Marilyn movie with, or what is it called? Blonde?
Blonde is the most
With Ana de
recent.
Armas?
Yes.
Yeah.
And Adrian Brody.
Is that right? Man. Gosh, he just keeps popping up. I don't even want to think about. Listeners, Fred and I were at an establishment on Saturday night and caught scenes from the movie Splice.
Yeah, and I feel like I was the guy in the movie who like sees guards circling like the exit, making sure no one can leave, because I had seen the movie and I'm like, guys, I think there's gonna be weird stuff on this screen. They should maybe think about doing something about it. Yeah. And then, if you've seen Splice, like a bar full of people just reacting to some interesting filmmaking.
There was some facial reactions, not unlike what you might have from scenes in Twin Peaks, but yeah, with Adrian Brody doing some very unmentionable things in that movie too, whatever that thing was. But getting back to the main point. So they worked on this project that was based in the book called Goddess. And the project ended up getting dropped by Warner Brothers, but through that, they became friends. So they went on to work as writer and director for a different movie called One Saliva Bubble that was going to be starring Steve Martin, which, I mean, I could have really seen a movie with Steve Martin directed by David Lynch.
For sure. Like The Man with Two Brains is kind of Lynchian.
Yeah. And I just like, because I think there's a weird edge to Steve Martin that kind of fits that very like snarky, dark humor that Lynch likes.
For sure.
So, but I guess it was then after this movie also failed, so we never got that, never came to fruition. But David Lynch's agent, Tony Krantz, encouraged him to do a TV show. And so the idea of Twin Peaks was inspired in part by a 1908 murder case of a woman named Hazel Irene Drew. And it took place in Sand Lake, New York. And Mark Frost had been pitched this idea by David Lynch, like we should do it about this murder case and kind of something similar to this Marilyn Monroe biopic that we never got to pick up. And he said, but I kind of wanted to make it more Dickensian about, a story about multiple lives in a contained area that could sort of, just live perpetually with this murder case that was going on. And so that was kind of how things started to develop. And they really liked the idea of a girl next door leading a desperate double life that would end in a murder. So, I mean, you can sort of see these slow origins start to come together here, right? So originally the show was called North Dakota, and it was going to be set in North Dakota, but Lynch and Frost really liked the idea of a lot of trees. They wanted forests. They wanted things to take place there. Well, there's not a lot of forests in North Dakota.
Right. And there is just kind of cultural superstition around the upper west, Pacific West, Sasquatch and all that stuff. The stories like around all those like pot farms and the crime that happens like up in Washington, like there's like this dark edge and almost like supernatural vibe to Washington. So it works.
No, it absolutely works. I think you're right. I mean, and Twilight takes place in Washington.
Oh, Forks.
Forks.
When are we going to go out to Washington? You can get some cherry pie and I don't know, pick up some Twilight trinkets.
Oh my God. I don't know that I need that, but I mean, you can't ignore that there is another supernatural inspired story that is very prominently set in Washington. No matter what you think about Twilight, that's the fact. So they changed the title then when they moved it to Washington from North Dakota to be called Northwest Passage before ultimately landing on the name Twin Peaks. But they liked the idea of the title Northwest Passage, so they used that for the title of the pilot. So they did a 10-minute pitch meeting to ABC during the 1988 writer's strike. So writer's strikes have been going on like every 4 to 8 years for the last 30 to 40 years at this point.
For sure.
So then ABC president Brandon Stoddard ordered a 2-hour pilot for a possible fall 1989 series, but he left that position like shortly after he approved this project. So they were kind of left in the middle of production as this guy was transitioning, and in stepped a little known person by the name of Bob Iger as the head of ABC. So they filmed the pilot for $4 million with an agreement with ABC that they would shoot an additional ending so that it could be sold directly to video in Europe as a feature film if it was not picked up. So ultimately, they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, of like either this thing gets picked up and we got a TV show, or we got a really like kind of like corny directed,
Right.
a really weird thing that just kind of wraps up. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And this was not necessarily like tacking on an ending, but just like the repackaging and selling of TV shows as films was kind of a big concept at the time.
Well, and it was kind of in an era too, when I feel like Disney was sort of jumping into the video on demand era too. Or, I mean, everybody remembers Return of Jafar, and like you'd be shocked to find out that like, that got a theatrical release, right?
I don't think it did.
Really?
I would be surprised if it did. It could have. The third one, I thought maybe had that, because the third one was kind of a big deal because Robin Williams came back.
Yeah, right. Which I don't remember a thing about the third movie.
No, but I will. So the thing I always remember, like when Disney Plus dropped, is going back and watching Return of Jafar. The animation is like way worse than Aladdin, and I never realized that when I was a kid. I was like, oh yeah, it's more. There's just more. And then the third one is a little more prestige-y, but I think it also might have just been direct to the old VHS clamshell.
Yeah, which I mean, at a time when VHS was so popular, you know, and people would buy video on demand, you can totally buy ABC being like, well, yeah, if this pilot doesn't get picked up, we could probably make some money off of it in Europe. But ultimately, when Bob Iger saw this thing, he was like, no, this needs to be a TV show. Nobody's done anything like this. And that's kind of a risky move at the time, considering what Twin Peaks turned out to be. Like, it's a weird show. It's dark. It's kind of darkly funny. In fact, sometimes it's very outrageously funny.
Absurd.
Yes.
Like you don't know if like reality is breaking in the scene because people are acting out of character, or there's like left turns, you know?
Yeah. And you definitely are kind of left just guessing on what's coming next, but also guessing on what did I just watch? Like, you're just like seeing these things happen. You're trying to follow Cooper's logic sometime, and you're like, wait, what? And that's Agent Dale Cooper, played by the aforementioned Colin McLaughlin, very brilliantly. But it's definitely a very quirky character. And I think that's what makes him so charming, though, too.
Yeah, he's very much like an all shucks guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of just a very simple dude, right?
Mm-hmm. But he also has like a darker edge to it. I feel even in the beginning, like when he's investigating how he talks to people, like there's definitely a dark side to it. There is that face thing from How I Met Your Mother, and I think there's a little bit of that. Like he'll like put someone in their place while he's investigating, while smiling with the big, ear to ear smile.
Yeah, right. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm excited to talk a little bit more about Cooper, but just to get through the end of like this history of how it even got to air. So ultimately, a lot of executives on this show thought there's no way this thing's going to see the light of day. Like, we don't even know we can turn this into a video on demand movie. It's so dark and so odd. And ultimately, Iger just got everybody on a call and said, we're making this show, and convinced everybody to do it. And he planned it for the spring release in 1990. But yeah, it was early then in that year that the show came to air, and it was kind of an instant hit. People were like, what is this? I've never seen anything like this. But ultimately, we get to the end of the third episode, which has like that dream sequence. It's very, very infamous of Cooper's first visit to the Black Lodge, the Red Room, where you have the arm talking backwards at him, and Laura Palmer, we have already seen dead in the very first scene in the show, talking to him. And that was going to be part of some of the stuff they filmed in there, part of the original finale or the ending for the movie that they were going to release. But ultimately just repurposed everything for that part of the episode in the show. Which, like, if a movie ended like that, I don't even know what I would think.
Right, yeah, that would be wild.
So it came on. It ran for, I think, 8 episodes in its first season. And then it got renewed to an order of, 22 episodes. That is crazy. To jump from 8 to 22.
Definitely, yeah. And it gets a little steam. They want more.
Yeah.
Whether that's for the better or worse.
Mm-hmm. Well, Fred, I think now that we have talked through the history a little bit, and now we got our coffee in us a little bit.
It's damn fine coffee.
Damn fine coffee from that Dunkin' over there.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do a Dunkin' app.
Oh, one day for sure. I don't even. Is there anybody who's a bigger Dunkin' fan than you are?
Maybe my wife.
Ooh, all right. I see it. We instead of going to the double R though, we went to the double D.
It's a little closer to us.
Indeed. But I feel like you can't talk Twin Peaks unless you're having a little bit of coffee. We got some pie on deck too. It's going to be pretty nice.
Yeah, it's really wrapped up in like that 50s Americana, which I think, black diner coffee and cherry pie. That's what I think about.
Absolutely. I mean, it does really, reflect the ideals or the feeling of the 50s a lot. Kind of we talked about like Tim Burton, kind of like he's trying to capture that like old Americana and sort of twist it into something kind of dark and maybe like German Impressionist where,
right.
Yeah, Lynch, I think is kind of looking at like the dark underbelly of America, and like it's like, yeah, we thought this was a perfect society, but
Yeah, kind of like I feel Tim Burton's kind of like the suburb Americana of 50s,
Yes.
and Lynch is like the small town Americana of the 50s.
yeah, that's a great way to put it. I definitely was not like privy to that was his style until I started seeing more of his stuff. Like if you watch Blue Velvet, it also kind of does that a lot, where it's very, and again, Kyle MacLachlan being the lead in that, but it's almost like that informed this show as much as anything, and it never really clicked to me until I saw that, and I was like, oh yeah. And it kind of missed out on like Dennis Hopper being in the show would have been outrageous.
Right. Well, I believe Blue Velvet is the one that has like the opening scene is kind of like the up close of like the flowers in the suburbs. And that's something Lynch has said that he's thought about since being young. The idea of like looking at like a nice flower, an outdoor view, and then looking closer and closer and seeing like, oh, there's a maggot inside the flower and it's eating it from its core. And I think that's kind of everything that Twin Peaks is.
Yeah, it really is. And it's actually exactly an image we see in both Blue Velvet and in Twin Peaks, which is kind of a perfect segue to dive into season 1. Because at the beginning of Blue Velvet, we see Kyle MacLachlan walking through that field of flowers, whatever, and he finds an ear that's like covered in maggots. And he's sort of like, what is this? And it's similar to the start of Twin Peaks, in which case you have someone who's living by like the seaside, and you have this old shack owner, the actual star of Eraserhead in the show. And he goes out and he finds Laura Palmer wrapped in plastic, washed ashore. And so we start the series with this murder, and it kind of sends the town into a frenzy. Like, they're like, how could this happen to this girl who was so popular, like this beautiful young blonde woman? And suddenly it just sort of like, I think kind of what we were talking about there, it shows this dark underbelly of what seems like a very quiet small town. And the rest of the season kind of starts to expose it like, oh, everybody's got secrets. Everyone's got dark stuff going on. Even if it's something that's sort of like things you can root for, like, Peggy Lipton's character trying to get with, what's the husband's name? It might be like Hank?
Yeah.
Or no, Big Ed. That's
Big Ed.
Ed, yeah. So yeah, you have Big Ed, and yeah, he's trying to...
I had no idea that was Rashida Jones's mom.
Oh, Peggy Lipton? Yeah.
I knew nothing of that.
Yeah, Norma Jennings is the character's name. But yeah, I mean, when you finally see them side by side, you can really see the resemblance.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, but obviously it's like, oh yeah, holy crap. So here's somebody else who made their name, and then you find out, oh, it's a Nepo baby. Very, very relevant to the conversations going on right now. But I think it is something that's so interesting because, you had my opening monologue. You get Cooper coming to town, and the FBI is immediately involved because the sheriff's department has kind of identified like this is very in par with all these other murder cases that have been going on. And suddenly it's like, yeah, when you got potentially a serial killer on your hands, suddenly it's like, yeah, it goes beyond the small town. But I do love that it's set still kind of like are grounded by the sheriff's department, and then he has to operate within them. And he's just sort of embraced their department. He's not like, you guys are the peons. He's just like, he's just tickled that he's with these dudes.
Mm-hmm. And I think the way that the pilot plays out, which is something interesting I was just thinking about just this moment, Tom, was I'm pretty sure the following year Silence of the Lambs comes out. I believe it's like 90, 91.
You're right.
And it's just interesting how so much of like this kind of story is influenced by Silence of the Lambs.
Yes.
Whereas this is kind of has some of that stuff, but also is a completely different vibe than that.
Oh, yeah. 100%. Because when you look at a movie like Silence of the Lambs, it's dour the whole time. It's dark. It feels like you're just like your skin's kind of crawling when you're spending time with Hannibal Lecter or Buffalo Bill. But like here, you don't know who the killer is. And so your intrigue is piqued right away. And so you're just kind of living through this case through all the people that Cooper meets. And I think it's such a fascinating way to tell a story where, I mean, certainly we're not unfamiliar with like murder mysteries and like you don't know who killed him and like, you know, it's a whodunit.
Right. Usually, though, they were solved by the end of the episode.
Right.
At the time.
The pitch for the series was like, we're not going to reveal who it is. And and spoiler alert for later, and obviously spoiler alert for all of Twin Peaks, we're not going to hold anything back here. But, you know, they got strong-armed into answering that question middle of season 2, and the show suffered tremendously for it once they ended that.
Yeah, it kind of put them in a corner.
Yeah. And it's too bad because I think what made the show so fascinating is you had, and I think it was at a time too, where you didn't have a lot of like through line of one story beat through everything. Where, I mean, certainly you've had dramas and things change and every day, you know, like it's almost soap opera-y, right? I think we've talked a little bit about that off pod about the idea that like this is almost riffing on soap operas.
Yes, and I feel like when you watch Spy Hard, the tone is enough where you know this is a parody of, you know, an action film or a thriller.
Right.
And you can kind of point it out by watching that it's heightened and played. Whereas the thing about Twin Peaks is it's doing that, it's parodying, it's in conversation with this style of filmmaking, but it's also kind of emulating it where if you maybe just turned it on, you'd think you were watching just another soap opera style show.
Right.
I feel it like that. That was the way to say it. I think I just said it where it's in conversation versus a parody.
Correct. Yeah, I think that's definitely a great way to put it because it's not trying to critique it in any way where, yeah, like you're talking about like Spy Hard or even Naked Gun, which is like a more like police procedural. You know, you don't have Frank Drebin just like suddenly like pulling money out of his pocket and there's just like shit falling out all over, right? It's like, no, Cooper's gonna like sit down, eat a piece of pie, and he's gonna just have like a moment over this like, damn good pie. You know, and like, and it's just, and I think that's what makes him like, they toe this edge, and it's something Lynch does so well of like trying to toe the edge between what's serious and where you can get some comedy out of that, or just the funny things of like this is too serious. Why aren't we laughing a little bit about this, right?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, so it's just more wink wink humor, which is great. I like that I physically winked at you. I can't say the word wink without winking. I'm like But I think we're introduced to a great cast of characters, though, and just to name a few, and hopefully not missing anybody, because we had like Michael Onkeen, who plays Sheriff Harry S. Truman. So, and the opening monologue, I know I mentioned David Lynch is somebody who it's like, oh, you don't even know his name. That's in the pilot, Cooper mentions, I'm going to meet Harry S. Truman, not a hard name to forget, or to remember. It's like, yeah, it's like the president. And you get a lot of names like that, right?
Right. Well, there's like funny names and like related, like, yeah, I think that's the one that talks about though is, Truman.
Right. And I just love, they're like Sheriff Truman. And then there's an even better bit in season 3 in The Return when
kind of like a who's on first of Sheriff Truman.
Right. You have another Sheriff Truman that's not the same Sheriff Truman. But yeah, you have him, you have, her name is pronounced Madkin Amick, who has played Shelley Johnson, who's another waitress at the Double R. Dana Ashbrook, who plays Bobby Briggs, who I think he's kind of a like a Dawson's Creek type dude in this a little bit
For sure.
Very over the top, including the hair.
He's also like, because this is like 80s, it's 90s, but like we're coming out of the 80s. He is like the jerk boyfriend character in any like slasher horror movie, I feel, like he is very much like the kind of guttery boyfriend in Nightmare on Elm Street, where it's like, if something's up, we're going to blame this guy.
Right. And yet it's by season 3 that he really becomes a more full character, and you see he's actually got some like acting chops too, and like it's like, whoa, I'm excited to talk about his arc because he has a I think he's one of my favorite arcs of the whole show, because he starts as like the shit, like dealing drugs for these bad dudes up at One Eye Jacks and stuff, and suddenly it's like, no, now he's on the side of the law, and I don't know.
Making love to the wife of an incapacitated husband while the incapacitated husband watches.
Yeah, little edgy. But I mean, that's some of the young cast they brought in. Same with Lara Flynn Boyle. This was like her first like really big thing before did she marry Jack Nicholson or did she just date him?
Is that a thing?
That was a thing. That was a big thing at the time because I think she was like maybe like 20 years his junior or something like that. Yeah, Lara Flynn Boyle. Let's see. So she was probably 20 years old in 1990. She did not marry Jack Nicholson. They were just dating.
LFB, what's the deal?
You're really harshing my vibe here.
Don't you want to go on my boat and eat submarine sandwiches?
I got tickets to the Laker game tonight.
I've made my own stew that I eat courtside.
Oh, God. So he was like 53 already? No, that's not right. He's 87 years old now. Did you know that?
Yeah.
He's getting up there.
Maybe not the best of people, but that is my favorite actor, is Jack Nicholson.
Really?
Hands down, for sure.
Oh, my gosh. That's a good pick. So, yeah, she was like 30 years younger than him when they were dating. Yeah, I got to confirm that, though. Yep, they definitely had a relationship. Their affair was secret, but they were frequently photographed. But I guess they asked her once about a relationship. She goes, Jack is solo. Oh, man, that's kind of wild. But it might have been later on, though, too. It might have been after Twin Peaks that they started dating. So she's at least a little bit older, but either way, kind of weird.
Yeah.
So... yeah, you have a lot of, and I'd be remiss not to mention, I think, one of my favorite actors on the show is Sherilyn Fenn, who plays Audrey Horne. And I think she's the breakout from the whole series. Like, because she's just she's definitely getting the right balance of like weird, but also can kind of pull in the drama and really like amplify the mood when she needs to. And again, talk about a relationship that's sort of sketchy because she has sort of a not committed romance with Cooper.
Yeah, that's one. There's the scene at the secret brothel with her and her father. There's some things with her that happen that are not great, but I agree she is one of the better characters of the show and very engaging to watch. In the first 2 seasons, I would say.
Yeah, season 3, we'll talk a little bit about that. But that was a lot of pretty, I don't know. That was even out there for what I was watching. There was times I was just getting a little frustrated. I'm like, where is this going? Mm-hmm. But I think we can't be, have a conversation about her without talking about her dad. We have Richard Beymer, who played her dad, Benjamin Horne. Who better known as Tony in the original West Side Story movie. And I mean, when you look at him then and then you look at him in Twin Peaks, it's sort of crazy. But I mean, we mentioned Peggy Lipton already, who was in the Mod Squad like back in the day too. Like Lynch loved to pull in like people who like he watched growing up or whatever, right? And,
right. He's kind of like Tarantino in that way, I feel.
Oh, that's a great comparison. Which I think Tarantino would like to say that he's probably got like a little Lynch edge to him.
Oh, for sure. And I feel like Tarantino's is an America. He's like rockabilly guys at diners in the modern times, though. That's his vibe, but very similar. Like they both play in Americana for sure.
Yeah, it is. I didn't even pick up on that. The Tarantino, especially beginning of Reservoir Dogs, right? Like. I almost said Reservation Dogs. I was like, that's not the same thing. Which credit to that series that now I'm even like confusing like what the right word is for it.
What?
Reservoir Dogs and Reservation Dogs.
Yeah, you got it right.
Yeah, I did get it right. I was saying, but it was like I think it's a credit to how good Reservation Dogs that's almost the first one I'm reaching for.
Oh, for sure,
Reservoir
definitely.
Dogs, which was for years, right? So I mean, and we'll get to talk about everybody, but I wanted to give a little taste. Pete Martell was the one who discovered Laura Palmer, played by Jack Nance, who is the lead in Lynch's first fully full-length feature film, Eraserhead. That's what I was trying to think of before. Just putting a pin in that that statement or that thought.
She's all wrapped in plastic.
He is, oh man, he's such a strange dude.
Definitely.
But I also don't want to forget. I mean, there's a lot of people. Let's just start getting really into it, because I guess it's hard to structure, Fred, how we want to talk about Twin Peaks, because there's so much to talk about. There's so many thread lines and storylines that are interesting but don't matter, ones that don't seem like they matter but matter a lot. And it kind of keeps going from, you go through season 1, then season 2, then Fire Walk with Me, and then you have The Return. So you have these 4 entities that are trying to tell one cohesive story, and it's sort of hard to be like, well, here at the beginning, we're supposed to kind of have no information, but now when you look back on it, you kind of know what the end game is in a way. And so I don't know. I mean, do we want to try and make sense of the story, or do we just want to focus on the themes here and really get into like what made this good?
I want to know about just kind of the overall enjoyment and what we find interesting about it, because if you just describe the plot, the bare bones plot, it's relatively simple. But then once you start, describing things that happen, like actual events in the show, it becomes kind of unwieldy, because it does have almost like a dream logic, dream feel to the whole show.
Right.
Some parts are less dreamier than others.
Yeah, but even some that are not dreams and supposed to be taken at face value as reality are almost like nightmarish. It's like, because this is a show that's not afraid to show a lot of assault. It's not afraid to show a lot of just like debauchery, right? It's a lot of sex. It's a lot of drugs. It's a lot of murder. It's a lot of violence. It's a lot of the seedy underbelly of America that Lynch is kind of trying to capitalize with a T to say, here is what's here and here's what's under the dirt.
Yeah. I was wondering when we were going to get some of him.
Oh, you were waiting for me, huh, Fred?
Yep.
Go ahead. Ask me anything.
So when you have those headphones in the show, is that just because you talk loudly in general, or what's the story behind the headphones?
Just love the choice. Next question.
God, have you seen Despicable Me 3?
Love that film. Golly, I could have those minions every day for breakfast if they were edible.
That's all the questions I have. Just the 2.
Well, thanks for David Lynch stepping in the studio to answer questions. And we can't ignore that David Lynch is a character. He's not. David Lynch himself is not a character. He plays a character that seems to be very heavily based on the person.
Definitely.
Yeah. Like, I think we've seen it. You kind of talked about it. He's in Louis, and he's just that person everywhere. And so it's like, it was brilliant to put a character around him that is kind of quirky as fuck, like everybody else in the show.
Yeah, even when he's playing another prolific director in a movie, he's still kind of himself.
Yeah, exactly. Like in The Fabelmans, right? Where he's playing, John Ford, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, man. What a role. That was so great. The horizon's at the top. But I think it is so fitting that somebody who had these kind of visions, and I don't want to dismiss Mark Frost, because I think Mark Frost did really help tie. He's like the rug in the Big Lebowski. He helped tie the room together, because he's like had that traditional like TV storytelling, right?
Right, yeah. He seems like a kind of guy you want on your improv team around a guy like David Lynch, who's going to throw wild shit at the wall and then be able to kind of rope it all back into, like, I don't want to say into a cohesive way, because it's not necessarily cohesive, but just more in a digestible way.
Right. Here, listen, to try and like summarize everything in the most succinct way possible. What we ultimately find, right, is Laura Palmer's murder is linked back to very supernatural events that are being investigated by this sector of the FBI. There's called the Blue Rose unit. And essentially they are investigating supernatural murders. The person that ended up being Laura Palmer's murder is, spoiler alert for it, fast forward if you really don't want to know, her dad. And that's a fucked up thing to even because And Fire Walk with Me really, really shows way too much of this, but just the assault that goes on. But understanding, too, that he's being possessed by some kind of like entity. And that's the type of shit that this show, I think, I don't know if it found it or if it knew this from the start. I think one of my favorite memories, and I almost forgot to share this when I was watching, or in my Twin Peaks journey, I went and saw Fire Walk with Me at the Milwaukee Film Festival. And Ray Weiss, who plays Leland Palmer, who is Laura's dad, was there with Laura Palmer herself to promote the movie. And it was cool to hear them talk about it and just kind of share their experiences with like making the series, making the movie, everything around that. But like, I loved one of his stories he told about David Lynch and when he found out that he was going to be the murderer in the series. And he's like, Ray, it's been you. It always was you. And he did it in just this like pitch perfect, like David Lynch impression. And Ray Weiss himself, God, if you've ever seen him in other things, he is fantastic. He is just a very funny guy, very personable. Like, if you ever find an interview with him, I would look it up.
He does look like the devil, though. So much that he had a TV show where he played the devil.
What show was that?
It was like some show where a guy was working for the devil, and it was like one of these 30-minute sitcom show. Had the guy from Tucker and Dale versus Evil, the guy with the beard.
Oh, okay.
So it was kind of like a dope doing the bidding of the devil, played by Ray Wise.
I'm looking at it. Apparently he was in RoboCop? I don't remember that.
Is he? Oh, yeah. I think he's like a baddie, like one of Kurt Bodeker's crew, I believe.
Oh, wow. Man, I want to rewatch it now. Mm-hmm. Oh, is the show called Reaper?
That's what it is.
Yeah, okay.
The guy has to be the Grim Reaper.
Yes. And that's pretty good. But yeah, it was Cheryl Lee. So we have to talk a little bit about Cheryl Lee, too, because she was obviously also at this event, and she claims she knows what Laura Palmer whispers in Dale Cooper's ear at the end of the series. She said there are lines for that, and people were like, well, what are they? She's like, I'm not going to tell you. That's not the point, which I think we can get into in talking about what Twin Peaks is about is ultimately not the point. We see all these supernatural investigations. We see all these things that happen, but ultimately it seems a little bit beyond what the actual core is of the series, is that it's a show about trauma. It's a show about trying to find your way through life and accepting that bad things are going to happen, and how are you going to overcome those, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I think it was such an interesting thing to hear from them in person, and just sort of like the notes that they got from David Lynch himself. And it's like they ask him, what does this mean? I'm not going to tell you. He's just going to say, this is what you're feeling. And it is a show about big emotions, and like you hear the score really drum up to drive up the emotions sometimes, right?
Yeah, the score is one of my highlights for the whole show.
I mean, and we should talk a little bit about the score in a bit, but I did want to share this about Cheryl Lee first. So when they were casting the show, they had a lot of big names they want to bring in. We mentioned, like a couple people who, like Richard Bamer, right, from West Side Story. So you're getting some pretty high-priced talent. So they wanted to get somebody who was cheap. So they were like, budget constraints, let's just find anybody who can just be the body of Laura Palmer. So they looked in the Seattle area, and they were like, just wanted somebody who could play a dead girl. And they did a casting call, and Cheryl Lee showed up. And I guess Lynch stated, like, he said, but no one.
No.
But no one, not Mark, me, anyone, had any idea that she could act or that she was going to be just so powerful being dead. And it said it was while Lynch was shooting the home movies that they're watching on replay. And I think it's the first or second episode. Like, they're watching, like, Donna with Lara Flynn Boyle playing her, and Laura just kind of, like, being filmed by James, who's this fucking James Dean wannabe motherfucker.
Great voice, though.
Oh, yeah. Such a great... I almost feel like when we talk about the score, we need to talk about that song that they sing together. But... I guess it was when they were filming just that B-roll footage for those like home movies that they said they were like, oh, they realized Cheryl Lee is something special. Like like she said that she did another scene, but the video with Donna and the picnic, there was that scene that really like clinched it in. And so they were like, okay, we need to get as much of her in the show as possible. So like they wrote in a lot more flashbacks. They wrote in the character of her cousin, Maddie Ferguson. It looks identical to her, just with brown hair.
Yep, so that's some real like 80s, 90s TV stuff, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's something you find a lot with modern shows, though, too, right? I mean, Barry had the guy who plays NoHo Hank. He was supposed to die like early in season 1. He ended up making it through the whole entire show.
Right.
Same with Aaron Paul playing Jesse in Breaking Bad. He was supposed to die very early on. Spoilers for all these shows, too. But dies. I mean, he makes it through the entire show.
He's still with us.
He's still with us, yeah. We're going to get, what was it called? El Camino?
El Camino 2?
Yeah. Electric Boogaloo. So I think you have this very strong presence with her. And I think it was like, they've bent over backwards to give her ways to get her into the series, including the movie Fire Walk With Me, which she's incredible in.
Right.
And I mean, and they've asked her to do a lot of like very traumatic shit.
For sure.
Like even just filming that, like, I don't know how to.
Especially because the first 2 seasons does have darkness, but it's still like a TV series from the 90s. So it's relatively tame, bad for the time.
Yeah.
But, you know, compared to today, like Game of Thrones or something, you know, nowhere near. But then you have Fire Walk With Me, which is a R-rated film. And then you have The Return, which is a prestige, you know, cable thing on Showtime, I think it originally aired on. So back into kind of the R-rated territory, which is another kind of what gives, I think, Fire Walk With Me so much power is going from the TV to the film. You can show more shocking stuff, and it kind of speaks to the whole idea of like underneath the surface, there's this evil. In this movie, they kind of can break through to it and really show it in all of its full guts and glory, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And I think that's purposeful, and it's got to be, you know, because it works.
It does. No, and I think you hit on something too. I think the guardrails came off, but also it has time to really dive into why all this stuff is so dark. We didn't necessarily need to see all the stuff that we see in Fire Walk With Me, but I think he had this ability to kind of show this, and it adds so much emphasis to the rest of the series once you do watch it. And it's like, I don't think there's a portion of the series other than maybe middle of season 2 where you can just skip, right? Because it's like everything, there's a lot of stray plot lines, there's a lot of weird stuff going on, but ultimately you get very like deeply emotional and unsettling things that kind of set the tone for everything you're watching. And I think you kind of mentioned it too. We've been talking about like it's under the surface. There's this idea though too that I think Lynch likes, and this is at least my interpretation. I'm curious what your thought on this is, like that like good and evil. There's no like one side's going to win, one side's going to lose. I think they're just forever coexisting, which is how we get the episode with like the invention of the atomic bomb.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with, because that just kind of speaks to what we were talking about with the beginning of Blue Velvet, kind of the good and the bad being all one thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then it's like there almost is no separation between it, even if there are forces for good and forces for evil. It's sort of like modern. I think my favorite like modern superhero stories and all these things have kind of been more obsessed with this idea that like you're never going to snuff out darkness. You're only going to hold it at bay until something eventually takes its place. Is it Lord of the Rings that's in?
That's kind of what happens in Lord of the Rings, I feel.
It's very Gandalf. I mean, maybe I'm thinking of Rings of Power, that he kind of talks about that, the character of Gandalf, or somebody does, of like, hey, it's like, just because you've thwarted this, there almost has to be something that takes its place. And I think we kind of see them even explore that with like, you know, the unfortunate passing of the actor that played Bob. You had to get creative in finding other forces that could sort of manifest the evil in the return. And I mean, we kind of have to talk about the Bob of it all. Just what a weird concept it is to have this just evil entity that doesn't have a body. It just sort of inhabits anybody it touches.
Right. It's not really like a tangible thing, but it can affect you tangibly.
Yes. And you get this very unhinged but very fun performance out of set dresser Frank Silva. So he was cast as Bob. And David Lynch himself recalls that the idea originated when he overheard Silva moving furniture around a bedroom set. So even early on, when they were filming the pilot, they didn't have everything set. But he heard a woman warning Silva not to block himself by moving the furniture in front of the door. And so Lynch looked over and he was just struck by this image of Silva in the room. He was wearing his like Canadian tuxedo that he had to keep wearing throughout the series.
He looks like a grip or something.
Yeah, he does. But when he learned that Silva was an actor, he filmed 2 panning shots with like him at the base of the bed. And there's that one famous shot, and like I think it's like the first or second episode where he's just sitting there like watching,
right?
Or is it Maddie or Sarah? And
isn't it the mom?
Yeah, Sarah Palmer. And gosh, she's also quite wonderful in this series. The actress that plays Sarah Palmer's, she plays Sarah Palmer.
The big scene in the pilot where she's breaking down, crying, and the score's going wild.
Yeah, maybe we should talk a little bit about the score, right? Because I feel like it's such a big piece of what makes this series even work. Maybe we kind of mentioned, right? There's like these feelings of like evil, and like you need a score that kind of represents it, right? And you get this performance from, her name is Grace Zabriskie, and it's like that's almost kind of encompasses that scene you're talking about where you hear the score drum up and she's like able to kind of represent just like, here's this like innocent person who's experiencing this awful trauma in her life. And it's Angelo Badalamenti.
There it is.
The composer. Fred, is there any specific song that you wanted to focus on here, or should we just listen to the theme song?
I just think, get that theme going.
All right, here is the Twin Peaks theme. Some good notes.
Powerful stuff.
But I mean, yeah, you can kind of hear a little bit of just sort of like, it's just very kind of that obstructive with those like, is it the bass strings? What is that?
Yeah, it could just be like a tuned down, guitar, but it sounds very bassy, or even just like it's like the very nice notes followed by the minor notes. Because you play music. Major notes are very kind of uplifting, powerful, while a minor note brings you down. And I think this song kind of has both happening at the same time.
Yeah, which again, very much in this theme of like this balance of good and evil. They're ever intertwined. 'Cause yeah, it's a very angelic melody, and then you just hear boom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's 2 scores working together, but they sound like completely different tones.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a great video on YouTube that I would encourage everyone to look up where Angelo Badalamenti is like talking about how he wrote the music for the series. And I think specifically it's Laura's theme, that it's just, he's like, I just think about what it all represents. And then I put it into it, and then he starts playing the song. And he had a much more eloquent way of putting it. It is great. We should listen to a little bit of Laura's theme, right?
Yep.
I just love how like it kind of crescendos right there, because it sort of switches almost on a dime on you, and you're like, "Whoa, what just happened?"
Yeah, and there's the note in it that are just a part of that song, the do 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 do. I feel is very similar to a song that was played in trailers for a super long time.
Oh, are you thinking of the Chariots of Fire song?
No, I'm thinking of here, I might have it right here. That's not it's not important.
Oh, okay. But still, I think it's the fact that people have used it in movie trailers, and it has that very like that melody that just kind of inspires almost hope and then like despair a little bit.
Right, yeah. The uplifting notes followed by like kind of the despairingly ominous music.
Yeah, which it twists everything so fine and then mixes in some of like that like very like kind of like quirky that like these like weird like jazz like,
Yes, kind of like any sort of diner scenes, or if Kyle MacLachlan is doing his like tape recorder and he's recording that, it's always like a boom 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 boom.
Diane, June 14th.
Wow, you know, like some of those in there.
It is. It's so good. Oh man, I really just feel like the show blends. It's like almost like getting so much weird stuff together and all these different factors that really make it memorable. And I think that's what captured a lot of people because, like I said, it's different strokes for different folks, right? But I think when you look at the performances of the cast, the music, the ambiance, it almost kind of like grounds it in like this late 80s, early 90s era. But then you're seeing like the 50s on screen. And then you're also seeing spirits like popping into like just normal everyday. It's just like, like you said, it feels like a dream.
Definitely. And one last thing to say before I forget, Angelo Badalamenti did the score for Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Dream Warriors.
And of course, your namesake Dokken.
Yeah. I feel like we can't miss out on not talking about Nightmare on Elm Street 3.
Of course. Which we've spent a little bit of time talking about. You can find it in our back catalog on our main feed here.
Yeah, on a Halloween episode or a metal episode.
Honestly, it comes up a lot. We got a lot of love for Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Maybe we do need to do a dedicated Nightmare on Elm Street episode.
Yeah, I feel we need a Nightmare on Elm Street episode, but then we just need like a Nightmare on Elm Street 3 episode.
Yeah. Which, speaking of the third, I mean, so I don't want to like overlap everything else, but I think we do need to talk a little bit about, you know, the vibes that change between seasons 1 and 2 and then the return and Fire Walk with Me, because you kind of really hit on that before, and I didn't want to jump all the way in until we sort of set the scene, but you get a lot of cameos from people who are like, I love this is so fucking weird, I need to be a part of this, because it's also so fascinating too. And like, I forgot that Kiefer Sutherland is in Fire Walk with Me.
Yes.
He's one of like the FBI agents. David Bowie shows up, and in a character that ends up being very consequential to the end game.
100%. Yeah, like I feel people want to work with Lynch, and Lynch does not work often, so it's kind of like people are gonna make a case to be there.
Right. He's one of those people that people will show up for. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And I just want to highlight some performances in The Return. Because I mean, and I think we'll be kind of talking a little bit about maybe some of our favorite performances at some point. But I do think, you know, you have like, speaking of Quentin Tarantino, you have Tim Roth and Jennifer Jason Leigh as like pair of assassins that, again, there's so many odd plot lines that just come and go and people forget about it.
Yeah, and I like they kind of feel like they're out of a Tarantino or like a Tony Scott movie.
Right? So, and then is that him, do you think, kind of riffing on even what like the people that have kind of like been inspired by him a little bit?
Probably. I do not see how it's not. Like, how do you... Because, like, Tim Roth, I feel he's a pretty versatile actor, only kind of plays, like, American scumbags when he's working with Tarantino. Usually he's, like, English, you know?
Right. But I think it's just such a fun spin. And I mean, and one thing I do like about The Return is as prestige drama as it appears to be, there's still that Twin Peaks kind of quirky ass like humor that gets like peppered in through some very hammy performances.
Yes, it has all the same stuff, except it feels like the budget was quadrupled too. Like it didn't seem like money was much of an object.
Right. So yeah, I mean, you have those couple cameos in Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. I mean, you still have Miguel Ferrer coming back, George Clooney's cousin himself, who we brought up a couple of times. He's so good. And he's got one of my favorite quotes.
Also in RoboCop.
He is also, maybe Lynch just watched RoboCop like, give me half those guys. I want the bad dudes.
Do you want the robot one?
No, I don't want the damn robot. Give me the goons.
I don't trust anyone. I can't see their eyes.
But he's got, I mean, Robert Forster, who we also have to mention was the original choice to play Sheriff Truman, but ends up getting to play Sheriff Truman in The Return, right?
Right. Yeah, I think he was busy on Gator or Crocodile, whatever big alligator movie he's in.
Yeah, something he was doing at the time.
The one that Tarantino saw and said, that's my Max Cherry.
Oh, wow.
He thought he did really good in this creature feature movie.
So funny. But yeah, I mean, then you have Naomi Watts, who shows up, who he worked with on Mulholland Drive, so you kind of understood that,
His
too.
probably most successful movie?
I think there's an argument for that.
Because I heard about Mulholland Drive when it came out.
Yeah.
And like when I was 13, 14, you know, like I didn't hear about Lynch movies.
No. And then, but that one's the one that, yeah, kind of like pierced through the atmosphere a little bit. I mean, he brings back so many people too from it, and everybody gets kind of their moment in The Return, which I think is why he wanted it to be 18 episodes, even though there's so much dead air for like almost 2 episodes worth of screen time. But, you know, he gets, I mean, the whole series is kind of centered around his main guys. Like, you still have Kyle MacLachlan playing not Dale Cooper necessarily, because what we see at the end of season 2 is that Cooper has to go into the Black Lodge, save Heather Graham, who was a nobody still at that time, and then he's stuck in the Black Lodge. Out comes a evil doppelganger of him possessed by Bob. I mean, we kind of, like I said, we had to talk about the Bob of it all, and that's where we get to here. It's like Bob kind of perseveres, even though it's sort of like he kills Leland and it seems like Bob's gone, but then suddenly it's like, oh, nope, he's been in the Black Lodge kind of waiting for his next victims. And lo and behold, here comes Cooper, you know, sort of trying on a different mission and comes out a totally different person.
Darkdale. Whoa.
Oh, God, yeah, that's right. Doesn't Darkwing Duck have like an evil dimension too?
Yeah, Negaduck.
Negaduck. Oh, man, he is like the Negaduck. But yeah, I mean, so you get these great moments for the main cast, but then you also get him pulling in his tried and trues. You get Laura Dern coming in as Diane, who we only have ever heard about talking in the third person. Now we put a face to the name. And Laura Dern was also in Blue Velvet and in a couple other Lynch films.
Inland Empire.
Yep. Right. So it's all these people he's worked with relatively recently. But you also get some great bit parts from just a smorgasbord of people. But, I mean...
Tom Sizemore.
Sizemore, yeah. He's in there. That biggest, like, dirtbag, his name is Eamon Farron, who plays Richard Horn, like Audrey's son.
Caleb Landry Jones.
That's the dude, yeah. He plays Bobby and Shelley's
Amanda
daughter.
Seyfried's daughter's boyfriend.
Yeah, so it's Amanda Seyfried is the daughter of those two characters who end up getting married. Like I said, there's so much plot that it's impossible to cover. You kind of
exactly.
But I think it's still such a pull to be like, hey, look at all these people we're listing off here that we're just like, I'll be in it for a minute, and that's it. Like, I don't care if my role doesn't make sense. I don't care because I get to work with David Lynch on this very like ambitious project. But I think one of the things. I want to try and ground it because I feel like we're sort of jumping all over here now. But I think one of the things that The Return does well is it really, really shoots its shit into the weird. Like the Fire Walk with Me was sort of like, here's a lot of weird world around here. It's like there's like a thin veil between this like parallel dimensions or these other dimensions in the real world. Then like The Return was like, okay, you know that this shit's going on. Now we're just going to start throwing this in wherever.
Mm-hmm. We're going to leave Twin Peaks for a lot of it. You know, we're going to be jumping around.
Yeah, it goes from like a small town show into like a road trip show, right?
Yeah, I think it's got like 3 different major states that it's kind of cycling around.
Yeah.
Like New York and
Montana.
Yes.
And
Dakota? North Dakota? I thought maybe eventually made it out there.
I think they might go into North Dakota too, but also Las Vegas, which I think represents the perfect embodiment of here is a place that looks like the happiest place on earth, but is like just has this real seedy underbelly. Mm-hmm. And it makes sense to like set a lot of stuff there and just sort of be like, this is the embodiment of everything that this show is about, right? I like the way that the show is not afraid to live in moments,
especially the return.
Yeah.
I feel it all does that. It all does that, but the return really felt like they didn't try to rein him in too much. Although I feel we should maybe play one of the infamous times where they did try to rein him in. Have you heard this? Have you seen this? Have you heard this?
No, it's just
So when they were making the return, apparently producer, someone on the set, maybe made a comment that the scene was running too long.
oh.
So here I have a little.
You gonna try to do a close up on Candy still? Or do you if you want to cut the time down,
What is this with everybody?
No.
What is it? Really?
me. It's
Why?
my
I'm serious. Fucking A, man. It drives me nuts. Who gives a fucking shit how long a scene is?
So I just love, like, he was just around, like, calling shots, like, getting grumpy.
Well, and I think we do have to talk a little bit about, so when they did force the whole, like, ending the murder plot with Laura Palmer, Lynch stepped down for a bit in season 2 and left it to Mark Frost to kind of just run on his own and was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I got shit to do.
I've got cigarettes to smoke.
And it's just because, yeah, you do feel his influence missing. And so I think when he got the Showtime series, his deal was like, if you're going to let me do this, I want to do this. My terms, my call. It's Mark and I. We're going to figure it out together. And that's who makes the final cut.
That's what it seemed like. And I think originally it was going to be like 8 episodes or something shorter. And then it ended up being much longer.
And again, there's like, if the scene that they're referring to is the one where you have the guy sweeping at the bar while Green Onions is playing for like 4 minutes, which felt like his big fuck you after that of like, you're going to yell at me about this? I'm going to put this in there.
I love if that's what he filmed the next day.
Oh, yeah. It's just like, I'm going to just let this sit, let the song play. And you're just, as a viewer, you're like, what am I watching? Is this art? Is this just nonsense? Mm-hmm. And I mean, there's even moments where it's like we break from. So there's a very famous episode then in season 3 where it's like season 8 or episode 8 where we see basically this whole flashback of like the creation of the atomic bomb. And it's supposed to be kind of like the origin of evil of like, you know, we see Jowdy or Judy that we come to learn create Bob. And it like generates all this evil that's going to be kind of within Twin Peaks. But, like, we have a little break in the middle of the episode from all this tension to just do a 9 Inch Nails concert.
Hell yeah.
Like, we watch a whole performance of a song. No real reason other than he's just a music video director that wanted to fucking get 9 Inch Nails in there.
Hell yeah. That's, like, one of my favorite parts of The Return is all the ending music acts. Rebecca Del Rio, she was in Milwaukee, and I actually saw her perform some because she came with blanking on his name right now, Donnie Darko director.
Oh gosh, Richard Kelly.
Yes, Rebecca Del Rio came with Richard Kelly because she is also in one of his movies, and they showed the movie, and she did a performance, and I saw all these people kind of flocking around her, all these kind of like movie nerds afterwards, and I'm like, she was really good, but I don't really know her. And then I'm watching Twin Peaks and she has this fantastic end song to one of the episodes. And it was just kind of cool realizing like, oh, I saw her sing.
Yeah. That's pretty sweet, actually. You got to see them together. And Richard Kelly, so he made what, Southland Tales, right?
Yeah, that was for Southland Tales. I couldn't remember that, and I was like, I'm not going down the rabbit hole of that, but rabbit hole. But it was very cool. She set up like a fan on stage, and so she was like constantly like blowing in the wind while she was singing. God. It looked like the end of a Twin Peaks episode of The Return.
Because I think you get to those times when they're at the bar and it's just a lot of nonsense is going on, and you hear about all these like plot lines that I almost felt like The Return almost felt like it was a parody or sort of a commentary on new TV, though, too. As much as the older one was a commentary on like soap operas, and we talked about how it's sort of like, and it was a parody of things that you were like seeing at the time, right? Soap operas, like big dramas that were on TV.
Yeah, I think I brought up last time I recorded it has like the tone of 21 Jump Street.
Yes.
That melodrama.
Yes, it does. And it really proceeds like that, too, with like almost like a cop drama, but then it adds all these weird elements. But then you see this almost like, it's almost like a critique on prestige television. And then they just sort of like get you into like, oh, you're going to find out all the answers. And it's like, you don't.
Right.
Because then there's just these throwaway plot lines that almost feel like they're riffing on the original Twin Peaks of like, why do we care about Nadine being like a young teenager, thinking she's a teenager again? Like, skip back to like the Laura Palmer case. It's like he's so fascinated. Him and Mark Frost are so fascinated by all the other things going on that they don't really care to tell you exactly what things are. And I do think that's kind of the crux of the show, is that there's a lot of noise in life. You're not always going to get what you want. And I think it ultimately kind of plays with this idea that we're sort of in an endless loop of what we're watching. And I think that's ultimately where The Return gets to, between all this nonsense, all this road tripping around, all this trying to figure out how do we get the real Cooper back? Because throughout The Return, Colin MacLachlan is playing, one, a bad guy who's a doppelganger of him, or two, a brain dead version of Dale Cooper.
Someone recently on Twitter likened we get a lot of videos of Joe Biden at events just kind of like smiling with his eyes wide. And someone said that like he's very much like Kyle MacLachlan in season 3 of The Return sometimes.
It's not wrong.
I know.
Because it's just the character of Dougie. Oh my God. Watching The Return week to week is such a different experience than I feel like binging it.
Right.
Because, okay, so as binging it, did you feel like you were as invested in it?
I don't know if I was really thinking about investment. I was just more like, it felt like, I really wish I took my time with it. There's this thing called a paint stick in college. Mm-hmm. It's used to paint houses. You stick it in a bucket and you can pull it up kind of like a super soaker, sprays paint on the wall. People started filling it with 3 beers, pushing it against the wall and walking into it. I feel like that's what The Return kind of felt like, where it was just all this information, all these thoughts and ideas coming at me super quick.
Yeah.
That it just kind of threw me back. Whereas I feel I would have benefited from a week to week kind of watch series. You know?
Which I think that is the best way to experience it the first time. But there is a bit of frustration where you're kind of hoping that Kyle MacLachlan is going to snap out of it and we're going to get the real Cooper, because that was like the character we love. We were talking about, he's
right.
Like charming, so quirky, so like interesting to watch. So to see him kind of be a shell of himself for most of The Return, which is like 17 episodes of him not being Dale Cooper, you're kind of left in suspense. And from a week to week standpoint, you're like, is this the week he's going to finally come around?
Right.
And it's like, no. And it's like, it almost took 10 episodes to realize, oh, we are probably not going to get this until the end of the series. Like, and you're always tuning in every week expecting an answer to some question that's being asked or some thread. And he just loves leaving you breadcrumbs and being like, well, this is it. And then you cut to a 4-minute concert. And then you're like, oh, that's the end of the episode. oh, we gotta wait till next week to find out. But I do remember having that feeling of like, damn it, it's the end concert. I was like, so now all these things I wanted to see what's gonna happen are gonna wait till the following week. But it was great. But then you also do get on a binge watch after that, you get to see where the breadcrumbs are leading to. You can finally kind of take in, oh, here's why you have the FBI involved with all these different cases. Here's why they know about all these things, which I like. Again, the plot line is kind of nonsense. It's sort of, like you said, it's absurd. It's silly. It's just weird.
Especially season 3.
Yeah. It makes no damn sense. And unless you really read up on it and try to figure out what's heads or tails of everything, you're just sort of like, okay, bad Cooper out there. Good Cooper started to make his way back.
Yeah, and Lynch is always like, or at least people say this about him, like, he doesn't want you looking up, but here's the thing, dude, I'm fucking stupid. I'm just kidding. That's what I'd love to say to his face. That'd be my question. That's what I should have asked him when he was here.
Oh, God. That would be funny. Just him being like, that's not the point. I do. So do you like the... What is your ultimate thought on Twin Peaks? Actually, I want to ask you that point blank.
I liked it. My thoughts on it now, I'm excited to give it another like 4 or 5 years and rewatch it all, because I know when I can pay attention and I know when I cannot pay attention.
Yeah.
Versus like before, I'm like staring the whole time, like trying to get everything. And I think I would really enjoy going through again. I just have to give it some time.
Yeah, because I think that is the way to do it. On the second watch through, I think that's where I learned to really love the series. The first time I was fascinated and I was like, this is a great piece of art that I'm glad I watched. When I watched it all again, I was like, okay, I think I kind of get, because you are paying attention to all the things that you want to know, but you also get to appreciate some of the quiet stuff that doesn't really matter. Like the plot line of like, yeah, Leo's incapacitated, and then you have Shelley and Bobby just being little shits around him,
Right.
like treating him like dirt. But like, I think if you had to break it down though into what the series is, like season 1 is sort of your table setter. Season 2 is really like your chance to like get your payoffs and really sprinkle the seeds for what the weirdness starts to look like. What Fire Walk With Me is sort of like your Rosetta Stone of how things all kind of fit together, what things are supposed to mean. And then the return then is ultimately your payoff to be able to sort of see how fucking weird and out there can this series get, and why does it matter at all. And some of it doesn't. I think it really is a show about themes, and I think that's what he cares about. I started getting into it before, and we've been talking about and dancing around it and saying it over and over. I think it's about this idea that trauma precedes everything in our lives. We're going to experience trauma in some way, shape, or form. How do we respond to these things? How do we live with trauma? You know?
Tom, we come out of the womb screaming.
We do. And yet, here we are, having a podcast, talking about a show about trauma.
There we go.
It's a weird life that we live, and it's a weird cycle. And I think ultimately that's what the ending's about, is that because we see Cooper kind of like think he's got all the answers, and he's like trying to save Laura, and he's trying to find her, and he's trying to like help her experience or like, you know, encounter her trauma and like really like, you know, overcome it. But in a way, he might have actually triggered something that felt like a brand new cycle. And he's just stuck going in and out of the Red Room over and over again. And whether it takes him back to the start of season 3 or the start of the series or to the end of the series, you know, and it's like, and where's the start? Where's the stop? Does he get more information? Kind of like the Dark Tower.
What?
Maybe an episode we will definitely do one day.
For sure.
That's almost a certainty. Even before this podcast ends, we're going to make a pact here and now. We're going to do a Dark Tower episode.
Yeah, I feel like we're waiting for the official announcement of the Flanagan series or whatever it's going to be.
I need an adaptation, and I almost want to revisit the books, but I'm also like, that was such an endeavor.
Well, that's what I'm waiting to revisit is as soon as it's official, it's happening at Amazon or wherever, I'll be cracking into them again.
Yeah, but to get back to Twin Peaks though too. So yeah, I think there is this cycle, and that it's almost like you can't really escape these bad things that happen in life, and you have to kind of learn to live with them, I think is sort of the idea he's after. And that the people who have embraced that have found a way out. Like we kind of see a happy ending for Big Ed and Norma, but we also see sad endings for other people who like Audrey, who kind of seems like she's stuck in a never-ending nightmare almost.
Right.
And it's just like, does she have a way out? Does Cooper have a way out? And maybe that's the whole point of Audrey's story, is that she's woke up from this coma. We assume she's in some kind of psychiatric ward.
Right.
Experiencing this non-real environment, but yet people are talking about these characters she's talking about.
Yeah,
so.
she's having David Lynch's Shutter Island experience.
Yeah. That's actually a really great way to put it. And it's tough. But I think if you really come in and you embrace the themes and you just enjoy the weird, a scene that I almost forgot about until I was researching today, when Andy goes to the White Lodge. You're not talking about Andy and Lucy. Who are
characters.
There's these kind of goofy, sort of very lighthearted characters that you really want to root for. And I thought Andy gets such a great moment. Him and Hawk in season 3 really get times to shine, especially Hawk.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I think his name is Michael Horse, who plays Hawk.
Yes.
And boy, I just love that he kind of went from an archetype or sort of a stereotype in seasons 1 and 2 of here's the Native American man who's in touch with his roots to now he's sort of the guy running the show at the sheriff's department and guiding Truman.
For sure, has a lot of pathos to his character.
Yeah. God, is it about the bunny? That's one of my favorite moments in there. It's Andy suggests that the chocolate bunny is significant to the Laura Palmer case. Mm-hmm. He's like, it's not about the bunny. Is it about the bunny? No, it's not about the bunny. It's those performances, man, they're great. And then you get Michael Cera as Andy and Lucy's son playing Marlon Brando. Too much to discuss, Fred. Too much. Maybe that's you know what? I might throw a little twist at us in a little bit.
Uh-oh.
But first, maybe we should talk about some Show Me the Franchise.
Show me the franchise.
We need a stinger for that or something.
Oh, yeah.
It's our former coulda, woulda, shoulda segment. Fred, what do you got?
Well, I think in a perfect world, look, I know he's probably, he's an older guy, this Mr. Lynch. Mm-hmm. I would so he made that in 2017, The Return.
Yep.
I would want a 2027 re-return.
Oh.
And it's kind of funny. I was trying to think, would I rather a new David Lynch movie or another series season of Twin Peaks? And I think I'd go with another season of Twin Peaks. And I don't need answers, really. I would just be curious to see what would happen next and whether it would have the same feeling of freedom that the last one did.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you there because I think to the point of the ending there, I don't know that there's ever going to be an ending. The end of season 2 was Cooper gets possessed. Well, so the end of season 1, Cooper gets shot, right? So
right.
I think maybe the story ends there. End of season 2, Cooper gets possessed by Bob. End of season 3, Cooper takes Laura, or I'm sorry, what's her name though? Carrie Page?
Yes. That sounds right.
I know and this was something that he actually mentioned too, was that he wanted to try and explore that character a little bit more. He said that character of Carrie Page who's an alternate reality Laura Palmer. He said he has a story that's kind of calling to him involving her. But yeah, at the end of that, we see her kind of like for not knowing that she's Laura Palmer, she goes back to her childhood home. She like screams, the lights go out, and suddenly the show's over. It's like all we see is back in the red room, Cooper's getting whispered to by Laura Palmer, and it's like, what does it mean? But I think if you made another season, it's going to end on another cliffhanger that doesn't make any sense.
Yep, then I'd be fine with that. Or I'd like the idea of just like another Firewalk with Me, another Twin Peaks movie.
Ooh. Would you want it to be another prequel, or would you want it to be kind of the definitive, like, this is the last thing we get, even if the ending is not satisfying?
I want it to be a continuation of the story, even if it's unsatisfying.
I could see that. More in like the weird alternate world that Cooper and Diane go into, and they're called like Richard and Linda or something like that.
Yeah.
Or I forget, he's got a real goofy name. It's like, I don't know, Ricky or something. But that would be good.
What about you?
I don't know. I would kind of like to see, I think I'd kind of like to see him go back to Twin Peaks, but I don't know what it needs to be. I almost wonder, could you do a Cooperless show completely? Even if it's like no Kyle MacLachlan? And I kind of feel like maybe the answer is no. We kind of did get that with Firewalk with Me, right? That is a very...
It's very light, yeah.
So the answer is you can do it. And I think Firewalk with Me is an underrated movie in general, and it's an underrated part of the whole story. But yeah, I would love a way they could find to bring Ray Weiss back in a way. Which I'm like, almost like, does it need to be a prequel to get him involved? But then he's kind of older now, so it's like, how do you do that?
Unless he's just in like some dimension somewhere doing something.
Well, he shows up in the Red Room in the third season, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
For like a hot second.
Yeah. Which, I mean, it was probably great to have him back, but I felt like it's such a shame when they do kill a character and you're like, okay, now we can never bring this guy back or this person back, you know. But
if you have like that redheaded witch from Game of Thrones, then you can bring people back.
Jon Snow didn't die. That's where it left off in the books. We're never going to know what actually happened.
Probably not.
No. Jon Snow will survive, but we just don't know if it's the same way. But I think it is interesting that he has mentioned that there's more here. I mean, another Cheryl Lee-led story, I think, is definitely on the table, and I would watch it, like, in a heartbeat.
Right.
But I would also love more MacLachlan, and so it's like if we got some adventures of Dale Cooper just sort of wandering through these weird spaces, like the Purple Sea or whatever that's called, like I'm all in for it. But I think that's the problem though too, is like you mentioned, he's getting older. Everybody else, we've had cast members that passed away, and that's kind of the end of the road for them. And so it's like you're running out of time to really run the story back.
Yeah, and there was like several cast members of The Return that died very close after the making of The Return. Like Miguel Ferrer, Tom Sizemore, Richard Forster.
Robert Forster.
Forster.
Yeah. And then you have the Log Lady.
Right.
I'm trying to remember the actress's name. I'll find her. Oh, yeah, Catherine E. Coulson. But I love that she's credited as Margaret Lanterman, a.k.a. the Log Lady. Oh, Peggy Lipton also passed away. Yeah, so, I mean, it's going to look like a much slimmer cast, but you got all these other people lining up to probably be in these things, right? So there's never an ending to all of it. But he's just going to go make more stuff with Krista Bell, who has played the Agent Tammy in season 3.
Yes, his new muse, it feels like.
Seriously, yeah. Well, he made like a big like music video with her and all that, or music videos.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, she'll probably be part of it somehow. But I think, yeah, there's definitely more opportunities for more story. I kind of would have loved to have seen maybe more. I wish we had gotten the Laura Palmer murder completely extended indefinitely, because I think that was the original pitch that they had. Don't resolve the murder, because then one, you don't have to get rid of Ray Weiss. Number two, then you have a through line that could have persevered into The Return and kept just creating turns and twists and still introduced all the supernatural things. But I think then you still have this through line. When are they ever going to answer it? Are they ever going to answer it, right?
So I have a question for you that I've been sitting on
Please.
for the past few days.
Please do.
And I hope this isn't going to break this thing wide open. But you say, Lynch says, Frost says, they all say that Twin Peaks, it wasn't about what the mystery was. It's about spending time with these characters, getting to know them, living in their world. Then how come, and I want you to be careful of spoilers, how come everyone was so upset at the end of Lost when they got nice characters who did their business? Do you see the thing I'm doing here?
So you're saying, why did people not embrace the journey of Lost as much as the ending?
Yeah, when Twin Peaks, as we said, highly influenced it. Like, what's the breakdown there? Is it just the Lynch of it all?
You finished Lost then, yes?
I have not, so maybe come back to that. I'm still pretty fresh in it, but that's what I'm thinking, because we talked about, I think more on the last time we recorded, that Lost is heavily influenced by Twin Peaks, and I'm watching it now, and I am definitely seeing that, and I don't know what's going to happen at the end of Lost, but that's what I kept thinking about the whole time, is if it's the journey, not the destination for something like this, why are people so salty?
So here's my read on the difference here, and I'll answer it too with a couple follow-ups to this. So this is sort of a trailing thought. So you tell me what you think about some of this too. Have you seen The Leftovers and Watchmen?
I've seen Watchmen.
Okay. So you had, who's the creator on?
Damon Lindelof.
Yeah, Damon Lindelof, right?
Yes.
So he was basically the writer given the reins on Lost to kind of take that to the finish line, right? Because Abrams kind of set all that up. So here's already where I think the issue lies, and this is why I think a lot of people got it. And this goes into Star Wars and a whole lot of other stuff. I think it's more of a J.J. Abrams problem as much as it is a David Lynch problem, because I think when they first started writing Lost, they had the idea, look at all these mysteries we're telling. Look at all these things we're gonna explore. And I think there is an intention that there's gonna be answers to a lot of these things. But then they just kept writing and writing and writing new twists and writing new turns and it just sort of lost the plot on a lot of these things that I think they wanted to matter to the story. This is the most spoiler-free way I can explain this. And I think that ultimately frustrated a lot of people of like, why are you dragging me along? Whereas I think Lynch has been very clear and very involved in it and letting people know as he takes them on this journey, this doesn't matter. This mystery. What I'm sharing with you is this so that you keep following the thread. But ultimately, I'm trying to show this to you in an interesting way. And so that you care about this character. And I want you to care about this character.
So you think it's more the creators doubled down on people asking questions and we're like, I don't know, we'll find out, versus from the beginning saying it doesn't matter?
Kind of, yeah. Because I think the murder of Laura Palmer does matter, right? That's the reason the show exists. But it's also the one mystery. There's a lot of mysteries, but we do get answers, but then it opens up other questions, right? So, but here's why I brought up Watchmen and all that. So Damon Lindelof, when he finished Lost, showed a lot of frustration with the way the story got told. And I think what he was like, I like the mystery box idea of telling a story, but I think you need to be intentional about what things you're intent on answering and what things you don't want answers for. Which I think in The Leftovers, he very much was like, there are things you're not going to get answers to, but that's the point. Whereas in Watchmen, it's like, here are the questions we're asking, and we're going to answer all of it in time. And here's how you tell that story. And I think he became such a better storyteller because of his experience on Lost. Something I wish Lynch would maybe do, but...
But you could see what got me thinking about that, right? Because it is similar in a sense, but I do get what you're saying.
Do you feel like you appreciate Lost more because you watched Twin Peaks?
I do.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I guess...
We'll circle back to it on the Lost episode. Yeah, and I didn't want to derail us, but I didn't want to not ask it because it's been on my mind since I started watching Lost and we recorded the episode.
But I think it's relevant. Are you bothered by the fact that there are not answers to a lot of these questions in Twin Peaks?
Not now that I don't know. It's hard because I came at it with a lot of like knowledge that it wasn't going to matter. And like I've seen enough clips on film Twitter of David Lynch to know that like it's going to be vexing and not going to, it's not going to be a straight shot of an answer.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Which I think he's content to give you enough bits to sort of figure it out. And I think people have some very good interpretations. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on this episode trying to answer all the questions of things. I think the theory I subscribe to is the one we already talked about. I think it's a cycle. I think it's just there's a big thing he's trying to embody with all the things, the storytelling bits he's trying to get. But ultimately, like, yeah, the plot line of whoever, James is, trying to hook up with like some woman that he runs away from town and has an affair with, like, it doesn't matter. It's just sort of like, but you care about James now because he mattered to Laura and he mattered to all these other people in Twin Peaks. So yeah, I don't know.
All right. Well, that's all I had.
That's all you got? Then maybe we should get to our power rankings for the week. Fred, here's my twist for you. We talked a lot about some of the performances, but I think maybe we can get into that a little bit. What are your top 3 moments from Twin Peaks? If you like, I will kick us off.
Yeah, you kick us off.
Okay. I feel like you usually go first, so I'm feeling like, whoa.
Yeah, it's pressure.
I'll give you some time to think about that, because I thought about this. So this is a little peek behind the curtain, folks. Usually we try and discuss what power rankings we want to do. We don't just do this all on the fly. But we did talk about performances, I think was an idea to do, but I kind of think performances come through in the moments of the series. Kind of like that moment with Sarah Palmer when she really has that like breakdown and the music score is just like crescendoing at that moment, right? And she's like looking at this photo of Laura. And like, yeah, that could be a top moment. Maybe that's an honorable mention, but there's a couple I really, really wanted to dive into. And I do think one of the moments that sticks in my head is this moment at episode 8 of The Return, where you have what they're called the Woodsmen, these like dark, like charcoal covered spirits that are from like the Black Lodge dimension or something like that. And you get this one guy that keeps going like, got a light. And he like makes his way into this radio station and he starts like just going into the microphone. And he's like, this is the water and this is the well. Drink full and ascend. And it's like, it's just this like this really rhythmic moment. It's so weird. And he's like draining like some guy's like life force at the same time that he keeps like hollering this thing into the microphone. And it just stuck with me. And somebody pointed this out too in like a deep dive, that the actor that played this woodsman was an Abraham Lincoln impersonator in real life, like a very famous one.
Right.
Because this guy kind of looks like we talked about all the Americana of it, and these woodsmen look like people from like the 1800s. They look like the ideas of America, and it's sort of an interesting idea to be like, look at these dark, twisted spirits that represent like our forefathers.
Right.
Yeah. So I thought that was just such a haunting. That whole episode, it could be one moment, but I was just like, that's one thing that's really stuck with me. The second moment I'll discuss is, I think there's a moment in The Return that I absolutely love where you have, and this is how I got to work in the performances that I really love, but you have these Mitchum brothers who run the casino. And they're like pissed off because they tried to get a claim on a fire or a burned down casino. So they would get like $30 million in like basically like, what do you call it? Like insurance payments. And so they have Tom Sizemore in the lobby and they're calling for him. And then they send Candy, who's sort of like a weird mirror image of like Cooper or Dougie,
Right.
where she's sort of like ethereal, kind of like out of it. She kind of moves at her own pace, like just doesn't seem like she's a fully formed person. Like she's just sort of like drifting through, but they like keep yelling at her, like, go and get him from the lobby. And so they're watching these security cameras, and it's just this another example of a long moment that's just stretching out, and they're just watching her walk out the door. And then you see on the security camera, she comes walking up very slowly to Tom Sizemore. and she starts talking to him, and they're just sitting there watching. They keep cutting back and forward to the camera of her just talking, and it's a full like 2 minutes. And you have the Mitchum brothers. One is played by Jim Belushi, who I think is amazing in this.
Yeah, I always say when he's always good.
He is. And then the other guy is Robert Knepper, who I think he's maybe had some issues off screen. But
He's a face.
yeah, but they're just kind of sitting there. They're just sort of nodding. And it's just this tension's kind of building where they're waiting for her to bring this guy back. And finally, you just hear Jim Belushi. He just looks like he's at the point of snapping. she's going, what the hell is she doing? Telling her his life story? Like, or telling her. He's like, what is taking her so? And it just is like the embodiment of what I've ever thought Twin Peaks is. It's just this like deeply like serious moment where they're gonna really put the knives to this guy, but it just you're just sitting in this suspension to the point where it becomes funny. Like the third moment, then, I mean, there's so many to pick from, right? But I think there is just this like amazing moment at the very, very end of the series where like it seems like everything has wrapped up and everything's fine. And you get this weird, like, oh man, it's like a superimposed image of Cooper's face just like staring at the screen. And you see him just sort of like looking off in the distance. And it, like, meanwhile, all this stuff is like passing up, but it's almost like he's like, you're like looking at it through his eyes, and you just can't like grasp whether he's like dreaming all this or whether this is like something real has happened before. And it's just such a very haunting like moment where like Diane like turns out to like be like somebody else, and
Right.
I don't know, but it's just it's the most like, it almost makes you feel like, did this whole ending just like occur in his mind? Is this what he's hoping happened? And it's like the first thing that I was just like, oh shit, something bigger is going on in here. I feel like that's not a great pick for another moment, but
I liked it. It was,
it's the very artistic end of Twin Peaks.
very much.
I'll think of something. Maybe it's Jerry or whatever that guy's name, Jerry Horn yelling at his foot in the forest.
Yeah, I'll go next. So I am not going to pick one specific scene, but it's going to be like a collection. And you just mentioned Jerry Horn and Benjamin Horn. Anytime those two are up to shenanigans together, acting like assholes, but like kind of funny and slightly endearing, even though they get pretty nasty characters at times. Like when they're eating the bread, it's hilarious. In the first season, they're just really going to town. I just think Benjamin Horn acts like a horny animated cat from like a, Warner Brothers cartoon or something. Like, he's always scheming. He's like maybe like cleaning his whiskers, thinking,
Can I offer a moment that I really stuck in my head?
Sure.
I was doing some research today on just like recapping the stuff. There's a moment though where like Leland comes in, like it's after he's like killed Jacques Renault. It's like in the episode 1 of season 2, and he comes in singing like some like Irish like song into like the Horn Brothers office. They're just having like this like serious conversation. They hear him come in. He starts singing. All of a sudden, they both start dancing. Like Benjamin gets up on his desk and starts like tap dancing.
for sure.
It's just this like, what the hell happened? Like they just got interrupted, and he's just sitting there singing as they're just like dancing their asses off.
It's like these are two really rich people who the world does stop for them for any of their bullshit. So like that's why I love it.
Absolutely.
And then I will say I originally had the Woodsman scene / full episode as one of mine, but I'm not going to use it. I am going to use from The Return the Darkdale interrogation.
Oh God! That's
Because
so
I think that might be the scariest, unsettling scene in all of Twin Peaks.
Oh yeah.
Because it's like our hero being very like evil in this very subdued way, and I honestly think it's one of the creepiest scenes of the show, followed by one of the most unsettling scenes because I like spooky stuff. I'm gonna say the end of season 2. Just the reveal with the mirror and the, what's the name he's saying? Annie?
Where's Annie?
Where's Annie? Where's Annie?
Actually, can I amend my last moment?
As long as you don't take mine.
I'm not, because that Where's Annie moment, I think it was like having people ripping out their hair for years. And especially the fact that Fire Walk with Me was a prequel. Like everyone's like, but what happens next? Like it's like the biggest cliffhanger like ever, almost ever.
It's that, and it's also like kind of a like horror movie ending. It's the end of Nightmare on Elm Street where the mom's waving goodbye in front of the front door, and all of a sudden Freddy's hand reaches through and rips her through the front door.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, everything's fine. No, it's not.
No, it's not. Oh,
so
God.
to blend that sort of like end on a scare / cliffhanger, kind of wrapping them, like a snake eating itself, I think that's gold. That's gold, Jerry.
Snake eating itself. That really feels like the series in a nutshell. I will replace that because as much as I do appreciate a really artistic moment like that, and it's so haunting seeing Cooper just sort of looking at this stuff. The better one though is when Bob, like he's like climbing over the furniture and coming at the camera, and he's coming at Maddie, and she just screams.
Yes.
And it is, for cable television, that is an absolutely terrifying moment of this man who just looks unhinged. And it's like, where did he come from? Who is this person? It's before you even know who Bob is. Like, you just know that they're seeing random people. Or just anytime, though, Bob is in a mirror and you just see him as a reflection of somebody else. It's just the most... that guy was just so terrifying looking. Like, even though he seems like he'd be like a total sweetheart off the set, but just like, he could just look so menacing.
Yeah, he looks like a chill guy, but the way they shoot him, he looks less than chill.
It's true. Fred, great picks. Those are excellent moments. Can I just shout out Matthew Lillard, though, too?
Oh, yeah.
Talk about
He's
him.
real good. There's a lot, we left on the floor.
We did. It's almost impossible. Maybe we'll revisit this one day on a Patreon episode. I would actually love to do a whole episode on just the return, and just talk about that, because I feel like that lives rent free in my head.
Yeah, I'd say that, or like I think we mentioned on the last time, maybe doing like a character draft or something like that.
Ooh, yeah, that would actually be really good, because I think then we can give everybody their moment. Because I think Matthew Lillard actually did. I know we were like not going to do top performances. He did get one of my favorite performances.
Oh, for sure.
He's just really, really eating the scenery, but in a good way, like not cheesy at all. But I think that does get us to the end of this episode, Fred. We have had quite the journey with Twin Peaks. We had a return of our own, but again, that's sort of our inside joke that we won't share necessarily with everybody. But we are hoping you guys enjoyed this journey with us, and we hope you will continue to take this journey with us. Fred, anything you would like to plug before we go?
No, I'm just going to let you plug the podcast.
That's right. We are on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, YouTube. We have our YouTube channel. Our whole back catalog is on there now. If you have an app that you're not loving or you want to cancel Spotify, you got another outlet. There's some ads on there. That's not our choice. That's YouTube. You can get YouTube Premium if you really want to get rid of those ads. Might be cheaper than Spotify Premium at this point. I got to be honest. But yeah, we have everything up there now. We also have our Patreon. We hope you will join our Patreon. It's $1 a month. We're popping out episodes. We got some very fun ones coming up here. So you can jump on to our patreon.com. You can find our links in our link tree in the episode description. And don't forget to rate and review the episode. We want to hear from you guys. And stay tuned for next time. We'll be talking about... Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Ken.
Want to go for a ride? Oh, it'll be a party. We'll see you guys then.
No cares, 'cause all I wanna do is charge my phone, drive, listening to you. And what they told you about will